get started, if y'all want to come around this way, probably be helpful. Right now. Yeah, just down here, I'll talk this way, so if everybody can just sort of stand on that side, would be great. Hey. Up there. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. My name's Mark Melrose, and together with my son Adam Melrose, we have the privilege and the honor of representing the Knibbs family during this tragic and sad time. After I say a bit about some of the things that I've observed so far, part of the investigation, a couple of Scott's friends that would like to speak. I know that the family greatly appreciates everybody being here in support of the family. Nobody wanted to be here today, and it just tells the family and the friends of Scott just how much he meant to everybody. So we're assembled here today to support the family and friends of Scott Knibbs. Scott was 47 years old when he was shot dead a week ago, early Monday morning, in his home by Macon County Deputy Anthony Momphard. I did not have the privilege of knowing Scott when he was alive, but witnessing the intensity of love and support within his family for each other tells me a lot about the man. We have committed to helping this grieving family ensure that justice is served. Scott was a father, a husband, a son, a grandfather, a neighbor, a friend, and a believer. He was independent. He worked for himself doing tree work and construction. He volunteered in the community, and he cared for his family. He was protective of them. Scott went to basic law enforcement training in the 1990s. He had training in firearms. He had his concealed handgun permit. At the request of the pastor of his church at the Cullosagi Assembly of God, where Scott and his family had attended for 25 years, Scott volunteered to be in charge of security for the congregation. He even underwent additional training in church security at the Franklin Police Department. Scott was one of the good guys with a gun. Scott believed in the Second Amendment, which allowed him to bear arms in his own home to protect his family. Scott believed in the Fourth Amendment, which allowed him to be secure in his own home, free from unreasonable searches by the government without a warrant. And all of us today here believe in the First Amendment, which allows us to now speak the truth. The renters up the hill moved in a couple of months ago. The renters lived farther up the single-track dirt road that ran just a few feet in front of the Knibbs home. They threw parties, and there was a heavy volume of traffic speeding up and down this little dirt road. Up to the renter's home, staying for just a few minutes, and then speeding right back down the dirt road. Scott was concerned not only about what was happening at the renter's home, but about the safety of the children who played outside. Scott asked politely for the neighbors to slow their visitors down. He complained to their landlord about these renters and the visitors coming and going at all hours. To protect his family, he put up some 2x6 boards as speed bumps across the narrow road so the cars would have to slow down as they traveled past his house. Despite false accusations to the contrary, these boards were not spiked and were harmless if driven over like a speed bump. The only nails in these boards were bent over safely and were not the least bit dangerous. A week ago Sunday night, the neighbors were throwing another party. One confused partier pulled into the Knibbs driveway late that night looking for the action. Scott went outside in his driveway on his own property and told the young man to leave and not come back. He handled this like the independent man that he was. He didn't need the law to tell this boy to leave. He handled it. Scott's daughter, Megan, was concerned enough that Sunday night about the incident with the partier in their driveway and the conflict with the neighbors that she locked all the doors to their home that Sunday night. The Knibbs generally left their doors unlocked at night. The family went to bed. The children and Scott's grandson were asleep in their beds. The lights were off in the house. Missy and Scott were in their bed. Near midnight, Missy heard a male voice talking to someone outside their bedroom window. They figured the neighbors were back and they were bringing trouble with them. Scott got his shotgun from next to his bed where it stayed. Missy heard Sheriff's Department one time as Scott walked out of the room. We will never know if Scott heard that voice. He was worried about his family's safety, and he was moving to protect them. What we do know is that Scott was a supporter of law enforcement. He would never threaten a deputy. He had no ill will to Deputy Momphard. Scott didn't know who was coming up on his porch at midnight. Only did we learn later it was Deputy Momphard coming up on his porch. Only later did we learn the deputy was bringing the neighbor up behind him onto the porch. Only later did we learn that this was all about these silly pieces of wood. Scott was going to protect his family from these unknown men outside his front door. There was no patrol car in his driveway. There were no blue lights. There was no tap of a siren. There was no phone call to the family to alert them and to announce this rookie cop's arrival at their darkened home. I would suspect in the hills and valleys of Macon County, most homeowners would have carried their weapon through their own home to their own front door under these circumstances. Instead, this rookie cop... Amen. Instead, this rookie cop must have been watching Scott through the front window as Scott was walking in his own house. He yelled at Scott to drop the weapon as Scott walked to his front door, and then 4 quick shots an instant later. Missy has described it as, put your weapon down that fast. According to Missy, Scott had no time to react. He was still inside his own home, behind a locked front door. Then the deputy broke open the front door and shot at him 2 more times. Deputy Momphard shot 4 rounds through the closed window next to a closed and locked front door, while Scott stood there protectively and confused in his own living room. Scott never fired his shotgun. Scott stumbled fatally wounded from the living room into the dining room. As he lay dying, the deputy stood over Scott with his weapon pointed at him. Then he began screaming at Missy and at Megan for them to get back, get back. Missy and Megan were both afraid that they were going to be shot next, based upon the way that the deputy was behaving. The deputy was, according to Missy, quote unquote, freaked out. Deputy Momphard said, I just wanted to ask him a question. Deputy Momphard failed to administer any first aid. Before Scott's blood was even cleaned up from the dining room floor, Sheriff Holland was on television a few hours later claiming that Scott confronted the deputy, acted aggressively, and that he shot Scott, quote unquote, the suspect, in self-defense. Sheriff Holland said, that he backed the deputy 100%. These irresponsible statements by Sheriff Holland have tainted this investigation. These statements were made before critical witnesses were even interviewed, including Missy and Megan, who were in the home. They were made before other witnesses were interviewed that were at the party. Before these witnesses were interviewed, they knew that the sheriff of Macon County already publicly stated on television that the deputy did nothing wrong. Scott died because a rookie cop was aggressively coming up to the Knibbs family home at midnight without warning. He had no warrant to arrest Scott, no search warrant to come in the home, nor probable cause to even believe that any crime had been committed. Scott had, in fact, committed no crime. A deputy may not enter a home without permission, without a warrant, unless an emergency exists. A few pieces of wood in the roadway were no emergency. When I visited the scene on Tuesday, I picked up one of these pieces of wood with one hand. Clearly, this issue could have waited until the next morning. Scott had a constitutional right to be left alone in his own home. But by simply exercising his constitutional rights inside his locked home, he was killed by a man standing outside on his porch. This rookie deputy chose to rouse Scott out of bed at midnight and to shut... Let me try that again. This rookie deputy chose to rouse Scout... I'm going to try that again. Got it. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. This rookie deputy chose to roust Scott out of bed at midnight. He decided to shoot first and ask questions later. Deputy Anthony Momphard has not been charged with any crime. I'm confident if Scott had shot first from inside his home as he tried to figure out what was going on outside and who was yelling at him, then he would be sitting in the Macon County Jail right now charged with murder. Instead, this deputy shot and killed Scott in his own home, and then the deputy went back to the security of his own home. So we are here today to demand that District Attorney Ashley Welch recuse herself from the decision about what crime Anthony Momphard should be charged with. She must let a prosecutor from another prosecutorial district or the Attorney General's office review the findings of the SBI. She cannot be impartial. Sheriff Holland has already offered his unequivocal support for the deputy. Sheriff Holland has been a vocal supporter of Miss Welch's political campaigns for district attorney. Miss Welch's former husband was employed by the Macon County Sheriff's Department as its attorney. Miss Welch is too closely connected with the Macon County Sheriff's Office to make this decision. That's right. The Knibbs family is a victim of homicide. Amen. Not surprisingly, given the sheriff's rush to judgment, no one from the district attorney's office has reached out to the Knibbs family to advise them about the investigation into Scott's killing or to offer any comfort or support. If this deputy was dead, I'm sure that it would be entirely different. I'm sure the prosecutor would be on television and talking with the deputy's family. That's right. The lack of any communication with the victim's family proves that this local prosecutor cannot make this decision about what crimes Mr. Momphard should be charged with. Amen. We demand that this case be reviewed by an outside independent prosecutor. Further, that it be submitted to the good people of Macon County so that a grand jury can decide the appropriate charges. This case is too important for any other short procedure. I would urge all of you to speak loudly and clearly that Ms. Welch should step aside from this case and a decision about prosecuting.
That's right!
Last Friday, I sent a letter to Ms. Welch asking her to recuse herself. I have received no response. Scott was deprived of his constitutional rights early in the hours of April 29th. Now is the time for Mr. Momphard to stand trial for what happened.
That's right.
There are a couple folks that, a couple of Scott's good friends that would like to speak to you folks about Scott. The family has asked that they're not going to give a statement to the media. They are still grieving. And so I just ask that you respect that process. I will help handle what we can do in terms of seeking justice for Scott. If anybody has information about what happened, please contact me, and we'll be happy to follow up on it. So let me turn it over. We have, I think, just two folks that are going to speak. Jeremy, you going to speak first? Jeremy Angel.
Thank everybody. I think it's a testament to Scott's character as to the turnout we've seen here and at the funeral. Scott was a good man. He always brought you up. He made you a better person. He was enthusiastic, and it didn't take him but a minute to where you felt like everybody that met him felt like they'd known him for years. He loved hard. He was a man of action. We met at a concealed carry class back in 07, something like that. We kind of known each other, before that. We went to lunch, figured out we liked stuff that was loud. They had a motor that went fast, and that was just the beginning. Then we figured out that our boys were going to be enrolled Rangers together as a church. And he hopped in the leadership there, and I hopped in as helping, and let me tell you what, he excelled. He was a teacher, he was knowledgeable, he had integrity, so much integrity, it's hard to believe. I heard a friend of mine say it a few old Sunday. He said, I don't think I've ever heard Scott Knibbs say a cuss word. Ever. I've been with Scott for years, a lot of time, a lot of hours spent, and you know what? I can't even. He took the boys on expeditions, he taught them, brought them up, some of them broke their families, and it just made his heart go out to the Lord. Loved these boys, brought them up, they love him, they're grieving today too. He was a disciplined man, he was a lineman, tree man, and you don't do that stuff without a lot of discipline. You don't go messing with 660 volts on a line in front of a transformer unless you know what you're doing, and he didn't comprehend. He lived his life by the Royal Ranger motto that he taught his boys. His family lived his life by the Royal Ranger motto that he taught his boys. The first line of that motto is be ready for anything. And I think this tragedy has shown that his family is ready for anything. Scott was always ready for anything. It didn't matter when you called. He was there. It didn't matter when. Calvin at 4:30 in the morning. The next line is be ready to work. If anybody was ready to work, that was Scott Knibbs. And when he called out of the truck, you better be ready. We're going at it. And we're going at it hard. Be ready to play is the next line. And he was good at that. We all had a lot of fun with Scott. And the next one's be ready to serve. And he proved that with all of his heart. He lived his life that way. A true servant. The last line is to live and obey God's word. And that's what he did. We had a lot of long talks going up and down the road and a lot of late nights on the phone keeping each other in check. picking each other up when we fell down and dusting each other off. I know a lot of good folks do the same thing. He was a good man. He led his family the way he led his life. And he led his friends the way he led his life. He was a great example. Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. First, I just want to thank everybody for coming out, and on behalf of the family, okay, can you hear me now? All right. On behalf of the family, I want to thank everyone for their support, their prayers. They are needed and they are appreciated. Secondly, I just want to tell you a little bit about the kind of man that Scott Knibbs was. Him and I worked together for years. We traveled all over the country, lived in hotel rooms together for months at a time, lived in RVs together for months at a time. Scott worked for Nationwide Insurance as a contractor during disasters. One of the people that were in need, taking trees off the roof, taking trees off the cars, out of the driveway, whatever. And it never failed that we would be on the job and someone would approach Scott just about every day. And there was a tree on their car, there was a tree on their roof, but they didn't have any money, they didn't have any insurance. And Scott would always get their information. He'd go look at the job. If it was a short job, he would do it that day if he could get time. If he couldn't, he would take all the information and he would tell them, I will be back. When the jobs would end, sometimes it would be a month, sometimes it would be 6 months. Scott had a list of all of these people that had no insurance and could not afford to have this work done. Scott would take his crew and sometimes pay as much as a month, working for free, still paying his crew, still providing them with a place to live, paying all their expenses, while in turn he would get paid zero. I never told anybody, never told his crew that he was working for free. He didn't want them to know that. He just wanted to help the people that were hurting, that needed help. And he didn't want anybody to know that. He wanted nobody to comment, no thank yous, nothing. He just wanted to do what he felt was the right thing. That's the kind of man that Scott Knibbs was. I know that for the community and for myself and for Scott's family, there's a huge hole in all of our lives right now. That was Scott Knibbs. That's a hole that won't ever be filled back up. Scott was a good man. Scott will be missed. I'll say that for the family, there has been a memorial fund set up for Scott at United Community Bank to help Missy and the kids get through this time. So if anybody would like to, you can go to United Community Bank in Franklin and make a donation to the Scott Knibbs Memorial Fund. Also, there's been a GoFundMe page set up to help the family as well. That's just Scott Knibbs Family and GoFundMe. All help and support is appreciated. And again, family would like to say thank you very much for all the support they've received so far. And I know that Scott's dad, Mike, would like to say a few words as well.
On Monday, I got a phone call that no dad ever wants to get. I've been a minister and pastor for 50 years. I've got phone calls, but not from my family in the past. And when I get a call that it's my son that is deceased, you don't know what that does to a man. I had a lot of comments about fake news, and I won't go into much detail there. Some of the reports that were just discussed the comments at Scott's funeral that I made really was from my heart. I just read a lady's article out of Asheville yesterday that I said things I didn't, and I got up in front and expressed anger. I never expressed anger. I expressed hurt. My son is gone. Will he be hurt? But I never expressed anger. Another thing that was reported that I said was, if the cop wouldn't have shot first, Scott would have invited me never said that either. What I did say is this. If Scott, Deputy wouldn't have shot first, Scott would have invited him in, thanked him for his military service, and he would have become a friend. Because my son is thankful for veterans. My brother showed me a text. I got this from your son on Veterans Day, thanking him for my service in Vietnam. But that's the kind of guy he was. And, it's tough for a dad to stand with it and see what he's saying. It was been better. About 2 years ago, I sat down with Scott, and I said, Scott, a dad always cares about the character of his son, his daughter. And I care about your character. And I said, I can tell a lot about your character by the category of friends you choose. And I've met his friends. As a dad, I can't thank you guys enough. But they just jumped right in and spearheaded everything to help defend my son. If my son was a jerk, that would be one thing. But my son wasn't a jerk. He was that kind of person. Somebody came up to me at the funeral and said, I saw your son. One of my children didn't have a dad. And then he had to go to this class where they wanted the dad to sit with him because my child didn't have a dad. Your son went and sat with my son so he'll have a father to represent him. That's who Scott was. That's who Scott was. So don't read the rug on those books. I mean, it's tough to stand here as his dad. I just thank you all for your support. I thank you for the appropriate applause at the right time. Some of you have signs, and we've seen them, and I appreciate that, but we're not making a big deal out of it. We're just saying we support Scott Knibbs. So thank you so much for that. Pray for his mom. We're struggling right now. We lost our firstborn, we lost our son. He would have been 48 in about 3 weeks. And Scott was a couple weeks old. We brought him into our church service. I was the pastor. And what we did in our church is hold our children in our arms and dedicate them to the Lord. That happened to Scott in May of 1970. Preachers doing that, you think, well, maybe my son's going to go into ministry, and you think my son's going to do this. Well, ministry was not Scott's thing. No. At least the kind of ministry I thought. But you know what? I have found out from hundreds and hundreds of people that Scott had his own ministry. And he touched lives in ways that his dad never could as a credentialed minister for 50 years. So I'm proud of my son. I'm proud of what he's become. I just don't want him to, I don't want his death to be in vain. I just pray that justice is done, and that somehow, when it's all said and done, we do care. We don't want anybody to, we don't hate anybody. And I guess that's what irritated me most about that article yesterday. Because I'm not expressing anger. I'm telling you, Scott was raised to love. And I hope you see that and heard that by those that have spoken so far today. So thank you for supporting my son. God bless you. Pray for the family. Thank you.
My name is Calvin Weeks. I'm a friend of Scott's. I have been for several years. This is going to be kind of hard. I've known Scott for a long time. He was a good man. We've done several activities together. I have 3 children myself. Those activities have been in Scott helping us teach our children to fish. Multiple, Sunday afternoons to the lake and time spent together. And Scott was a good man. As Jeremy had mentioned, back in January, I had hit a deer. I called Scott at 4 in the morning, and he answered the phone, and he says, what do you need? What's wrong? He was there within 15 minutes to help me. He was just a helping man any way he could. My heart really breaks for the community as well as the loss of the Knibbs family. I know we're all trying to stay strong in this, and it's going to be a hard road for all of us, including the family. And as I said, Scott was a good man. He did anything he could to help, just like everybody else has said. And I thank all y'all for coming out today.
thank you very much for coming, and really thank you for your prayers, your support, and your attendance here today. It's very meaningful. Thank you very much.
Be on no camera.